Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope that you're doing well. We are in week 2 of Sagalong, Egil's Saga, chapters 23 through 44. Things are heating up as we've met our titular character, Egil, and he is an unpleasant little creature. He's just a boy in these final chapters of this week's reading, and he's already aspiring to a crown. Not the crown of Norway. King Harald had it. He was violently unifying the various petty kingdoms in Norway. We saw that in our reading last week. It led to the violent, despotic murder of Thorolf, a key warrior for him. It's now passed on to Eric Bloodaxe. Egil's never going to get that crown, but he can aspire to the crown of the most awful and unpleasant and wretched historical personage in these Icelandic sagas. I like to think of them as personages because so many of these characters in the sagas are based on historical persons. They're people who lived, and they're remembered. They're certainly, passed down in oral tradition and then written down. And in Egil, we might have the person aspiring to that very unpleasant crown. But let's dive in, because we're going to get to this boy, this horribly unpleasant boy. We're going to get to him. But first, let's pick up where we left off. Thorolf has been murdered. And so his father, Ketil, and his brother, Skallagrim, who's going to be Egil's father, they bide their time. They're invited later on to sort of make amends with the king, make peace with the king. That goes about as well as you'd expect. This is a violent saga, and these two guys are not easily forgetting what has happened to their family member, who had loyally served the king. And so the violence just kind of keeps going. It's a cycle. But Skallagrim and Ketil go in and they take a longship. They raid and take a longship. When Ketil went back to the stern, he raised the halberd and struck at Halvard. He sliced through both helmet and head and buried the weapon right to the shaft. Then he pulled at it so hard that he swung Halvard into the air and tossed him overboard. Skallagrim cleared the prow of the ship and killed Sigtryg. Many of the crew jumped overboard, but Skallagrim's men took the boat they had come in and rowed after them and killed everyone who was in the water. This is not a pleasant story. Later on, Skallagrim releases the men whose lives he spared, not chased down. They told them to go to King Harald and tell him precisely what had happened and who had been responsible. Take this verse to the king, he said. Complete is the valiant man's vengeance on the king. Wolves and eagles walk, wading through his kin. Hacked to bits, Halvard was hewed into the waves. Spiteful at Sigtrygg's wounds snatches the grey eagle. And I love the idea of these warrior poets just taunting nonstop. The trash talk within these Icelandic sagas, particularly in Egil's saga, is top notch. When I had mentioned there are aspects of it that can feel very modern, there are ways in which the characters across Egil's saga don't behave nobly. They're not constantly these, idealized paragons. They are really wild, earthy individuals who are not above gloating and taunting. And so they steal this, and then it goes on. It is said that people who are shape changers or who go into a berserk frenzy become so strong when the fit is on them that nothing can withstand them. But as soon as it wears off, they are left weaker than normal. Kveldulf was the same. When the frenzy wore off, he felt exhausted by the attack and became so weak that he had to take to his bed. And so Kveldulf, who we were reminded at the very beginning was a shape changer, and that was sort of a clue that we're going to see some behavior from Egil that might... or other descendants that might reflect this, that he was a shape changer, that his name meant Nightwolf. And so he's had sort of this one last great, rousing raid, battle to avenge his son, and then he ultimately dies. But they push his coffin overboard, and it makes it all the way to Iceland, and they decide that's where they've got to land, and with Kveldulf's coffin. Which is kind of a cool touch. We, across this saga, get a number of etiologies and etymologies where we find out why a place is named the way it is named in Iceland, or in Norway, but primarily in Iceland. We find out little bits and pieces of people's names and genealogies. There's a mention of Gunhild, who popped up in Njal Saga at the very beginning, ruining Hrut and Un's marriage. And so we have these little connections and webs across the Icelandic sagas that make them so fun to read sort of across years and see those connections that exist between them, the intertextuality that existed. At one point, Skallagrim and Thorolf receive an axe, and Skallagrim takes down an axe at King's Shaft, and went outside with it. The shaft was black with soot, and the blade had rusted. Skallagrim looked at the edge of the axe, then he handed the axe to Thorolf and made this verse. Many flaws in the edge of this fearsome fighter. It is blunt, this big warrior, weak in the blade. Let us send the curved coward the sooty shaft back. No good reason to regale me with this royal gift. And within this cool Folio Society edition, we have a picture at one point of an axe that's been tossed into the sea. And the like cool artwork on it and stuff. But Skallagrim has his experiences, but he's not certainly a very kind individual. He does have various clan alliances, family alliances, and we see that across many of the sagas, that you have the alliance, you have your family, but you also have the people who you foster, and that's really, to a true sense, become family. And that's sort of a trope that was true across history. Someone might be a ward of a cousin or another neighbor, sometimes as a hostage, and feel like real kinship to that family. And they might either be on the same side or on opposing sides in a later battle. And we see that in the Icelandic sagas, those links that exist not just with the people who are your blood relations, but people who you've shown hospitality to, people who landed and you shared food with, and that there are these other senses of ties that exist within the culture. And we don't necessarily see quite as much of Icelandic culture in Egil Saga so far as we did in Njal Saga, but there's plenty there to sort of spot and threads to draw on. But then we do get Egil himself, and he has sort of those attributes that we find in some of the heroes of epics, though he is anything but heroic. He's large for his size. He's, of course, ugly, like his father, the bald, ugly man. But he's large for his size, and he's incredibly unpleasant. He's violent. He gets he engages in the various activities with the boys. Skallagrim takes great pleasure in games and trials of strength and enjoys talking about them. Ball games were common in those days, and there were plenty of strong men in the district then. But none was more powerful than Skallagrim, although he was beginning to grow old. And Egil shows up, and he gets in fights. He attacks an older boy who's stronger than him. He attacks him. They then go, he and another older boy who's his close friend get an axe and go kill a boy. And this creates this entire battle that falls out, and other people are killed. And so we see this side of Egil, that he is a catalyst for destruction. He's not a good person. Pretty much everywhere he goes, there are going to be problems. And that does follow him, even at a very young age. It follows him around Iceland. It's going to follow him to Norway. And it's fascinating to consider that this is a saga likely written down finally around the same time as Njal Saga. And Njal Saga really pushed this idea of, hey, maybe we need, some sense of order with all this anarchic lawlessness that's going around. And now we're starting to see that even though those early chapters revealed the dangers of a central authority that can't be checked, here we start to see that when you have a person like Egil in your neighborhood, maybe you would like a central authority to just put an end to this nonsense. But we have King Eric and Gunhild are at a party, and Bard is there preparing a feast, and there are sacrifices. And it's a splendid feast with plenty to drink in the main hall, and Egil, though, is there. And he just keeps drinking and insulting the host. To this enemy of ogres, you spoke of an ale draught. Well, you stood at the sacrifice, you shifty grave breaker. Your guests, little guests, they would be greeted with lies. Behold the truth blaster, black-hearted Bard. So Egil just keeps drinking and insulting his host. And they take it to the queen. And Queen Gunhild pops up in some of the sagas. But here she's pitted against Egil, who, instead of drinking the poison jar, cuts his hand up and then carves runes on the goblet, and it breaks. And so, of course, he's leaving. And then we get this moment that feels, it's excess in every sense. There's excess in terms of this gluttony and this drunkenness. There's excess in the violence. So Ulfr was about to pass out. Egil got up and helped him to the door. He kept hold of his sword. When they got to the door, Bard came after them and asked Ulfr to drink a farewell toast. Egil took the horn and made this verse. I am drunk, and Ulfr is ashen-faced with ale. This brew from the beast's horn bubbled through my lips. Your feet will not follow instructions, old fellow, though my poetry patters and pours like rain on you. Egil threw the horn away and grasped his sword and drew it. It was dark in the entrance. He thrust the sword so deep into Bard's belly that the point came out through his back. Bard fell dead, with blood pouring from the wound. Then Olver collapsed, spewing vomit. Egil rushed out of the room. It was pitch dark outside as Egil ran off from the farm. And so the King Eric, of course, orders everybody to search for Egil because they want to end this nonsense. Tomorrow when it is daylight, we shall scour the whole island and kill the man, he said. And we'll find out next week if they actually catch Egil, or if he's going to just keep, dropping off all these taunts. I mean, he's almost like a violent hip-hop artist or something, the way he just throws it out and then is attacking somebody. It's wild and nonsensical, and it certainly provides a lot of personality to the saga, as much as we abhor Egil. I don't know if anybody's a huge fan of him. Please let me know if you are, because certainly I'm not too much a fan of Egil. I'd like somebody to put him in his place because he's wreaking havoc. But that does take us through this second portion of Egil's saga, and we'll see what happens as he continues to grow. I mentioned, of course, Njal's saga and the contrasts that exist, but also those little connections like Queen Gunhild's presence. There are ways in which Egil is very much a counterpoint to Cuchulainn within the Thon. Again, a heroic young man who's great in size beyond his years and prowess beyond his years, just as a boy, as we saw in the Thon. Although Egil doesn't really seem to have the noble character that we see here. There was mention of a character who ends up being the wife of the, I believe it was Rinveig, who ends up being the wife of a king who is the half-brother of King Harald Hardrada. And there was a connection, I thought, particularly at the end within this saga, where it felt like, okay, what if we took the excess from something like the Satyricon and then amped up the level of violence and action that we see? And I think that's a little bit of what, if I remember, we'll be seeing across Egil's saga, is that there is this sort of wild, otherworldly nature of just detail and the excess that's going on at these dinners and at these encounters that remind me of the Satyricon, though, of course, it's also a lot bloodier. And I was reminded a little bit of Redshift by Alan Garner, which takes place across 3 timelines. One of these is in a Roman Britain, and another is during the English Civil War, and sort of the furtive nature of it, the violent nature of it, the very sudden way that the violence can take hold, and the psychogeography that exists within here. Certainly, I think, has a place aligned to the numerous etiologies and etymologies that pepper the Icelandic sagas, though that it might be a place where someone died, it might be a place where someone was given a farm as a gift, it might be a place where there was, a temporary truce sealed, that we get these little pieces and bits. The other piece was that the various trash talking that Skallagrim and Egil engage in across these chapters reminded me a little bit of the Epigrams of Martial. And then finally, as I was thinking about the sagas this week, I was reminded of works like the Sunjata, which is, this translation is a pair of translations that were done in modern times of really an epic from West Africa. And the way in which different cultures, each possess their forms of epic or heroic epic, and the ways that different translations can exist, whether it's one that emphasizes sort of the humanity of it, the agency, or one that emphasizes the supernatural and sort of the fatalistic side. And so this edition has parallel translations from Bamba, Suso, and Banna Kanute of the Sunjata, and sort of each one leans towards an opposite end of the spectrum in that. So this might be a cool one to check out if you're interested. So anyways, this was week 2 of Sagalong. I hope everybody's doing well, and let's hitch our pants up and rat not sag for week 3. See you later. Thanks.